Good morning, everyone. Welcome to episode number 13 of Merritt in the Morning with your host, Jim Merritt. I'm Brad Klopfenstein. We are coming to you live, if you're watching on Facebook today, from Cafe Audrey's, beautiful Port Harrison, open for breakfast 7 days a week, dinner Wednesdays through Saturdays, located at beautiful Port Harrison. Remember, hashtag food at the fort. And while you're here, don't forget to order an Alpsprow beer, our other sponsor. Thanks to Alpsprow. So today we're going to be talking agriculture, and our guest today, Jonathan Lawler, aka the punk rock farmer. So I know Jim has worked with him in the past. I have followed him on Facebook. Jonathan is a farmer from Hancock County. How long have you been farming, Jonathan?
Off and on most of my life.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about agriculture, myths in agriculture, because I love how you dispel buzzwords and kind of boil things down. So welcome everybody who's watching. Jim, how are you this morning?
I'm well, thank you. You know, one of the great things about Jonathan Lawler being a farmer, he is very concerned about the issue of hunger. And it's not just an issue, it's a crisis. And that's, that's really how we met. And we're all concerned about our fellow man. But your interest in the hunger space, if you will, how did that start?
So it actually was a hunting trip with me and my son. We were, hunting trip at our own farm. We were scouting for deer, and I was very concerned about the pressure that we had that season on deer, saying things under my breath about the deer. And I told them we'll probably put 2 of them in our freezer, and the rest that we shoot will donate to Hoosiers Feeding the Hungry, because they will take deer from hunters, which is awesome, and then distribute it to food pantries, food banks. He actually had said, well, maybe it'll go to the pantry in my school. I was like, he went to Eastern Hancock, which is a farm school. I mean,
I'm a Mount Vernon guy. So
Okay, yeah.
yeah.
So if you drive from my farm to, his school, you don't pass anything but farms. And I was like, well, at first I thought he meant I'll shoot it and give it to my school to prepare. And I was like, yeah, they can't do that. And he was just like, and then he said, well, we have a pantry. And at first they didn't believe him. I was like, farm school should have it. I mean, they have cattle on campus, they have a greenhouse on campus. And then I got to looking, and sure that there was a food pantry. And so I started researching hunger. My idea of a hungry person was somebody that lived under a bridge, that was homeless. I didn't realize that there were lots of folks that were food insecure who also had jobs. And we started researching what food banks were doing, what they were giving out, and there wasn't a lot of fresh whole food. And I thought, maybe we could plant an acre. And the more we thought about it, we decided to turn the full force of our barn for one season to just giving away as much produce to food banks as we can. Thought maybe it inspires some other farmers. Greenfield journalist picked up on it and wrote the story. And an Indianapolis Star journalist picked up on it. Amazing lady by the name of Marie Gilmer, and she was so impressed by it, she decided to put it on the front page of the Star, and it went viral around the world. I got a call from somebody in a government official in Chile wanting to know if I would come down there and show their power. Like, no. I mean, it was a whirlwind. And we had some folks from the East Coast fly in, look at what we were doing, and they said they had funded a lot of community gardens and everything, but they were looking at our tractors and seeing the science that we had behind what we were doing. So we've never funded something like this, that we feel like this could be. Do you think that you could do 80,000 pounds of food? And I looked at him, I was like, our goal is 1 million a year.
Yeah. So your farming operation, before you started doing this, how big was your operation? What, I assume your corn and beans?
No, we were produce, we were
Okay.
wholesale produce.
Okay.
And we, that's what we do, wholesale produce.
Okay.
What we had left, we would take to farmers markets. It was actually farmers markets who had us. We had so many people that would come up to our employees at farmers markets, be like, is this organic? And it wasn't, and they'd be like, what? You know, and they were like, well, so I started looking into organic, and we actually switched to organic agriculture.
Tell our audience what the difference is.
The polite version.
You don't have to be polite.
Well, I mean,
Work hard, be kind.
Yeah.
Be nice.
the only reason I switched to organic is because of the higher price points. I knew I get, and the really funny thing is the difference between certain crops like tomatoes, fresh market tomatoes, peppers. The only thing you're doing different is the inputs. An organic input versus a conventional input. And for people that don't think that there's pesticides used in organic, that's completely false. I remember a lady, when we had switched to organic, we had these cherry tomatoes out to try. She walks up and she's like, oh, and they're organic? Good, I don't even have to wash them, pop one in her mouth. And I was like, what? You have any idea what we put on those tomatoes or where those tomatoes, they're outside. I mean, there's birds.
There's manures.
Yeah. So we just, we did that, but when we approached nonprofit, we decided to go back to conventional. But the difference between organic and I'm not knocking organic farmers. I have a lot of friends that are organic farmers. And if that's what the consumer wants, that's absolutely what they should get. But that being said, there's no nutritional difference between organic and conventionally raised. There's claims, there's people who claim it, but scientifically, none of the land grant universities who have studied it have been able to show a difference. So yeah.
One time, I think the last time we saw each other was at the market at on. They're on the corner, it's right around the corner from the fort. And
Oh, yeah, on post.
yes,
Yes.
in post, 38th and post.
Yeah.
And at that time, you were having interns come out from Indianapolis Public Schools
Yeah.
to learn about farming. Is that a program going on now?
So we don't practice a lot of that anymore. That actually turned into something that we call a farm. It was a programming that stood for felons, addiction, recovery, mentorship. And we would actually bring guys out, guys and gals. It's nothing. It was nothing about being a woman or a man, but some of the girls that came out, it just wasn't for them. I had one girl though that came out, she could work easily with any of the dudes that were there. So
these individuals that have been suffering some sort of trauma, some sort of issue in their lives.
yeah, whether it's they've gotten into trouble with the law or they dealt with addiction. And I mean, that was a hard program because I had one guy who he went through the program, worked for me for 2 years, actually got promoted to a farm manager. Like he was no longer in the program. He had a fentanyl problem, had been clean for 2 years. We noticed there was a little bit he was starting to act a little bit just different. And we had found out that he had been going to court for custody with his son, and a judge had granted his wife full custody. And he was upset, from what his dad told me is he went back to fentanyl, but of course he did what he did before, and we actually lost him. He died of an overdose. But
Anything to drink?
they have coffee.
They do.
Oh, yeah.
I'll get it.
Okay.
No.
Just cream and sugar in it.
Cream sugar, okay.
Thanks, Jim. You didn't have to do that. I was just gonna grab Kate, but. So. All right, so let's talk about. Let's go back. You said your son went to
Right.
school, you learned that they had a food pantry.
Yeah.
So how did that change your operation? And what was it that said to you?
Well, I mean, I had just sold another business and I was doing well financially, so I thought, I talked to my wife. And I said, what, we could actually plant the entire farm and give it all away. And we'd be good. And that was the plan for 1 year, not to do it for 7 years. And we did that first year. It was rough because it was kind of a new venture, but we grew we donated 498,000 pounds of produce that year.
So how many acres and what kind of produce?
So that year we were farming 47 acres and it was tomatoes, sweet corn, watermelon, bell peppers. We had cattle, but we weren't doing anything with them as far as with the nonprofit aspect of it. And zucchini, man, zucchini is, you got to find uses for that wrapping, and it grows like a weed. The funniest part about it is, in doing all this stuff, I would have so many reporters. I have reporters from around the world that were calling me, wanting to come visit the farm. And we had right when you pulled in, we had 12 900-foot rows of zucchini.
Okay.
Wow. And zucchini has kind of a look to it, I guess.
Yeah.
But the reporter didn't know that it was zucchini. And he's like, so are you guys also commercial hosta growers? But he said that kind of like out of the blue, and I'm like, no, what? No, we're not. He's like, so what's with all the hostas? And I'm thinking about the hostas planted around our house.
Yeah,
I didn't think it was a abnormal amount of hostas that my wife had planted, and I was just like, I don't know. I mean, my wife likes to grow. So you just grow them like in the rows, like you do farm, and then I was like, no, and he's like, well, up at the road, I was like, oh, that's zucchini. He's like, oh, I didn't know it grew that way. I thought it grew on the farm. And I was like, well, I mean, I explained to him that it is related to mining plants, but it's a much more compact, a compact type. So,
Well, we want to know where the Plunk Rock farmer.
Planter House, that's where I got that name.
What's that?
It was Planter House.
Planter House.
Yeah, and it wasn't anybody at Planter House other than the kids that were in their after school program.
Planter House is on the west side of.
Yeah, ran by an amazing guy named Brandon Cosby.
Yeah, so Brandon Cosby, yes.
And he had said these kids had never seen a tractor, so we were coming out there to do it. So I thought, well, we should just like load up and let's load up and really make it cool for them. And we took the tractor out there and they watched us plow. And I mean, it was like 2 acres. That should have taken me about 15 minutes, but it took me like an hour because I would have to stop in front of the kids every time. And they'd want me to raise the bucket, they'd look at the plow, the tiller.
I love that curiosity.
Yeah, and but I had longer hair. And I was wearing a Misfits shirt, and of course, I mean, the guys that were with me and stuff, we were playing punk music, and the kids started calling me punk rock because, I was also wearing jeans and boots, and it was kind of a weird look for them. And a reporter was there, and she mentioned it, and a lady who had been following Brandywine Creek Farms actually made a Facebook page. She made a Facebook page for us. Like, didn't say anything, like kind of like a fan page, I guess. And when it got up to like 4 or 5,000 people following it. She was like, you guys should take this over. And I was like, you know what? I've got to be really careful what I say as a representative of Brandon Farms. There's a lot of stuff I have to say, and there's things I'm seeing that I'm not like. And so I talked to a couple of my board members, and they were like, that's a perfect opportunity because you can say whatever you want. So that's how it started, and I just started calling stuff how I saw it, and I've had a lot of people seem to want to embrace what it is. It's a hard thing to do because punk rock, the genre, I have plenty of people that let me know all the time that I'm not really punk rock.
Well,
Now it's on a keyboard, it's not, you know, in front of me, but they let me know because, you know, and the thing I say to them is like, well, if there's a rule book for punk rock, by all means, please let me know what it is so I can read it. I was unaware that such a thing existed. So yeah, that's where that name came from. And I'm okay with it. I feel like sometimes I'm pigeonholed that I better be like, people expect me to be like catching stuff on fire and going screaming at people, and that's just, to me, you know, I'd rather just educate the public.
So who are we sponsored by?
wow, interesting you would ask that, Jim. Let me show you. First, if you're watching online, everybody's probably watching online, you're watching Merritt in the Morning. We are sponsored by Altsprout Beer. Ask for it by name, now available at Cafe Audrey's at beautiful Fort Harrison.
Among many other places.
Among many other places. Actually, we just went, they're opening a new Total Wine and More out in Avon this week, and we just went in there. So one more spot. The West Siders have more opportunities for Altsprout than about anybody except those in Lawrence. So thank you, Total Wine and More, as well as Plainfield Discount Liquors and Bourbon and Canal.
And thank you, Cafe Audrey.
Cafe Audrey.
They take very good care of us here.
So you mentioned that that your punk rock is not necessarily real punk rock necessarily.
Well, I have people that let me know that when they disagree with anything I have to say, I'm all of a sudden, you know.
Well, I want to pivot that a little bit to farming. Most
Can
people,
I give you guys a really good example though? Of what I'm talking about.
of course.
So I don't know if you guys are aware of Jason Aldean's song.
Oh, yes.
So that came out. That song infuriated me. And I'm from a small town and I'm about as right as they get. I wasn't infuriated by what the song was really saying. I was infuriated by what I would call a non-farming, like, industry hack singing about us. Yeah, if you try to carjack us, we'll absolutely shoot you. But if your car breaks down, we'll also be the first ones to help you fix it.
Yep.
And give you directions and help you. So that really upset me. And I had a lot of people that I would say would lean to the left, just swarm my Facebook page, going, that's the most awesome thing I've ever heard. Again, my biggest issue with it was the guy singing it, and it wasn't real. I don't think that was like a small town message. Flip side, so I have all these people saying you're the most awesome, great guy in the world advocating for this stuff. Then Anthony Oliver's song comes out. I'm like, this song is awesome. And this is a good song. Those same people that were like, you're awesome, were now like, you're terrible, you're not punk rock, this and that. And I'm just like, well, neither is Oliver. So he's a folk singer.
Yeah, saw an Onion headline today that says country music industry doesn't know what to do with a singer who's actually from a small town.
And a farmer in the country, yeah. So, yeah. So that
Back to the John Mellencamp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So pivoting to farming, in agriculture, obviously less than 2% of the population is involved in agriculture now.
Correct.
So for most people, there's a pretty broad disconnect between the food on their plate and the people that produce it. Do antique tractors and antique tractor shows, I think most people think of that as farming. Does that do a disservice to agriculture to kind of reinforce that it's on a small scale and it's small time?
I don't know, I mean. Not so much those, I mean, I think there's a lot to be said about those guys that are keeping that old equipment alive and going. And especially when you use it as a contrast, so, you know, I think of, like, I have a Farmall Super C. That's crank start, you know, not anymore, we put a 12 volt in it, so I have to do that, you know, throw it on. But. You know, that compared to like my 2019 Kubota build tractor. I mean, the differences are huge. You know, whether, you know, I had a John Deere 2060 that, I mean, the thing would drive itself, and I mean, that was awesome. But with my type of farming, you also lose a little bit because I like open station tractors, no cab. But to see where we've come in agriculture, I think it's marvelous. It's you know, the fact that now, you know, a commodity, a row crop or farm, the amount of people they would have had to have even 50 years ago versus now it can be done by it. It can truly be done by it. Same with produce. I mean, other than produce is very labor intensive, depending on the type, but now there's, I mean, we're actually looking at going into processing vegetables because there's equipment now that will do that. And I want my sons to have something that they can actually do. But from, like, I have sensors in my soil that tell me how much, you know, how moist the soil is. You know, when it rains, I mean, I get told how much is getting there. We have sensors that, you know, when we irrigate, you know, a computer is actually telling us the mixed rate of the fertilizer going into the system. I mean,
High tech.
it is high tech. I mean, you know,
People through the years, there's been, and we know this, there's been such a hype situation with climate. And I have talked to many farmers, and it's more, they kind of missed the mark. I think most of us are very concerned about weather. And farmers, correct me if I'm wrong, but farmers look at it from day to day, minute to minute, hour to hour.
Yeah.
And how concerned and how often are you looking at the weather changes and what's going to happen then?
oh, I mean, I have field view, which is an app on my phone that tells me the temperature in that field, you know, and we actually we start measuring.
It's called field view.
Yeah, we
It's
actually,
an app.
it's an app. We actually,
Farming by app.
yeah, and we actually, we measure, you know, 8 inches off the ground for temperature, and then a 6 foot measurement, and there's usually a change. You know, the humidity, the moisture, the rain, yeah. We are the only profession that lives and dies by what Mother Nature decides to throw at us. You know, as far as, you know, a lot of the climate change stuff, I hear it, I see it. I don't know if it's getting hotter. The problem is, it's one of those things that there's no real nuanced conversation. It's two people screaming at each other from both sides.
Yeah, nothing gets done.
And I'm like, I mean, like the other day, I just read an article that said, in order to save the planet, we're going to have to start eating bugs. And I was just like, and I actually made a Facebook post about it. I said, you know what? All my diesels run deaf. I plant cover crops. I try to no-till or at least minimum till. I'm not eating bugs. Just write that down because I'm not eating bugs.
How many acres do you farm?
This year we actually only farmed about 40. We were you know, when we were so we no longer run. We actually moved away from that just because we were able to see that a lot of changes have been made, and that's what my main goal was. I wanted to change the industry as far as produce being available. But we average anywhere from 100 to 115 acres of produce, and I can tell people right now, it is not. I mean, I feel like I've lost years in life doing produce because it's laborious, it's backbreaking. And it does not matter what the temperature is, you have to. You have to, there's no, I mean, if you don't start pulling off, produce that's turning, you're going to be in trouble, you're going to lose your crop.
And you have hopes of passing this on to your children?
If things change, that start, we start seeing more support for American farmers, especially like in the food industry and the grocery industry, then yes. If not, I mean, I think my boys will always be involved in ag, but it will probably be more animal based on the livestock side, which I'm okay with that too. Everybody, there's nothing, I mean, my favorite animal in the world, people like cats and dogs, my favorite animal is deer. I mean, it's what I enjoy, and the worst part about it is I'm starting to see that animal agriculture is coming under attack harder than anything else. I mean, I sit there and listen to Leonardo DiCaprio talk about how, we need to cut meat consumption, and he's flying around the world in his Gulfstream jet. I'm just like, you know what, you first. So, yeah, that's an issue.
So we're watching Merritt in the Morning. Our guest today is Jonathan Lawler, also known as the punk rock farmer. Let me ask you, so the northern 2/3 of Indiana, that is as good a farm ground as you're going to find anywhere in the world. What are your thoughts? The state of Indiana is assisting Eli Lilly into acquiring 9,000 acres in Boone County. Convert that over to heavy industrial.
Yeah, I know all about this.
So what are your thoughts on converting farm ground over to other uses?
Well, I mean, Thomas Jefferson said that the foundation of any good society is agriculture, and it seems that we want to just, we want to turn it all the way. Yeah, that was a bad deal all the way around. I actually have sponsors, my own sponsors, who said I wasn't allowed to comment on it because I was pretty upset about the whole.
I'll comment on it.
Yeah,
It's a horrible idea.
Yeah.
And
oh no, there's no
trucking water down from the Wabash River for 35 miles was also a horrible idea.
Yeah, I mean, there's why the investment went that way instead of, trying just to keep and I hope the farmers did all right,
I'm sure they did.
Well, I mean, some of them don't seem to think so.
Okay.
I mean, I know that. And yeah, it just, and we are, that's the thing about farmers, like come election season, I feel like we are like the one minority that even though we're not like an ethnic minority, it's like, politicians want to make sure that they are, let's make sure that the farmers are okay with this and this. And especially once you get outside of like a state, once you're like at the federal level, I mean, I feel like half of those guys will just pay less.
Do you consider yourself a produce farmer, or could you see yourself growing hemp someday?
I won't grow hemp until there's good enough an aftermarket for it. I actually have a friend in Tennessee who converted half of his tobacco farm to hemp, and he was needing people to show up with truck, semi trucks, and he was having people show up with like cars and wanting like a single bale so that they could go make.
Yeah.
And he actually converted back to tobacco just because he couldn't. The aftermarket industry, I would love to see Indiana or whoever start really pushing, to put some infrastructure in place for its use.
Well, yeah, and regulate it so we know what's in it. And I did a Jim Merritt's Indiana podcast about hemp and its industrial uses. Indiana's soil and its climate is just perfect for it, including up by Elkhart.
Right,
And the interiors of cars and so many different
right.
uses for it that now jute from Bangladesh and over in France is imported, and thus the question. So you see yourself a produce farmer.
Well,
Ongoing.
I see myself, yeah, I mean, our family farm will always try to be as diversified as possible. I mean, if there's an opportunity to grow it. Something I always try to tell people too is. When you harken back and look at how hemp was grown in this country early on,
The thirties and forties.
well, not just, well, so you had the thirties and forties, but even before that, you know, yeah, they found a lot of uses for it. And I'm not being a gatekeeper here, but I was like, so what happens when a farmer like me or farmers that are bigger than me get into it? And we're planting, 48,000 plants per acre. Thomas Jefferson was probably planting 3,000 plants per acre. And I think, well, that would be my friend in Tennessee, that was his problem, is his population and the amount that he was able to produce. He couldn't find a market. As long as they, like, I've heard that there's a concrete mixture for it.
There is.
That should be,
Yeah.
that right there, I don't know.
Construction materials in general.
I don't know that enough of us could grow it then, or at least we could keep it flowing. Yeah, I've looked at him. I mean, it's not balanced. I mean, it's no worse than say, corn. I mean, corn can be rough on your soil, so you better be taking care of your soil.
What's the worst on the soil? Is it tobacco or?
So I personally feel like what I've grown in the past, the absolute worst thing for my soil was it's actually any nightshade that is concentrated. So if we put 10,000 nightshade plants, which would be tomatoes, peppers, or even potatoes are a member of the nightshade, they will suck the nutrients out of us. I mean, so if you're not amending your soil, if you're not, really taking care of it. And that's the hard part, because when people come to my farm, while they don't recognize how things are planted, once they get up close and look at the individual plants, they're like, well, I have one of those in my garden. This must be easy, and it's like, it's a completely different process. And what they don't understand is those 6 tomato plants they have in their backyard garden, they get a lot of wiggle room with them. I don't. I've got to make sure that we're doing it right. Like, I had a lady, we had tomatoes at the end of June, and I had a lady, she's like, how in the world do you have tomatoes this early? I'm like, well, what do you do for a living? This is what I do for a living. I mean, I've got to do this. So, yeah, I think that's the thing. You talk to people about soil health and you get 1,000 different
Carbon.
Yeah. To me, you need to do what works for you as a farmer for your soil. I mean, I have 3 different soil types on my farm. So each soil type has to be treated a little bit different.
That's I never would have thought about that.
Yeah.
Do you use plastic?
Plastic culture. Yeah. Yep. With drip irrigation.
Okay, so that's just, you have a more consistent soil moisture.
That's
level?
actually, so we decide how much water the plants get, not Mother Nature.
Okay.
Sometimes that doesn't matter, because if you get enough rain, the wicking from the plants down into it, that can happen.
There's through the years, I've kind of accumulated. I like to say knowledge, but maybe not. And one of those issues that comes from farming, they talk about when you turn the soil, that carbon is emitted.
Right.
Where are you on something like that?
So it just depends. I mean, I'm personally one of those guys that I think every 4 years there should be, you don't have to go deep, but there should be some tillage to get, and that does, of course, it releases carbon. So does a volcano erupting. So when but it doesn't have to be done every year. I mean, there are guys, they do it every year. If you're going to farm organically and to actually have true weed suppression, you're going to have to actually what we call moldboard plow, actually flip the ground over. It goes significantly deep, so you bury those weeds and they don't have a chance to sprout. With non, well, with conventional, you have a little bit more tools in your toolbox to be able to control weeds. But yeah, I think there needs to be a happy medium. You don't need to be turning your soil over every year, but you're not going to be able to no-till forever without doing something. Well, ponding, I don't know if you guys have noticed the ponding, when you drive around and see these no-till fields, and they have ponds after the rain. That's not something you used to see.
Right.
That's because of no. So,
And not just a low place.
yeah,
Or a
yeah,
wetland.
yeah, there's a crust that is actually protecting the soil, but at the same time,
It's not permeable.
right,
Yeah,
exactly.
so. You've been watching Merritt in the Morning.
There is a rumor.
A rumor. Oh, we're good about rumors.
Yeah.
Tell me, Jim.
Stockyards Bank.
I love Stockyards Bank.
They may want to be another advertiser on Merritt in the Morning.
I'll be. Now, you too could be an advertiser with Merritt in the Morning. You get with me or Jim. You guys know how to get a hold of us. Talk to us. We would love to have you as a sponsor. Thank you, Alps Brow.
And thank you, Cafe Audrey.
Cafe Audrey. Well, then we'll throw our little slides back up for everybody, just so they can see.
Klopp, I'm really glad that Jonathan Lawler was with us today.
Me too.
I think I learned a little bit. And
I love talking farming.
I do too. And I think anybody that knows me, that follows me on Facebook or X or whatever social media site is I've always been interested in the hunger space and hashtag kill hunger. And I truly believe that we need to teach those that are in the schools, not just in the farming community, but in urban or rural areas, the value here, because it's really the breadbasket and something that I'm really glad. Thank you very much for appearing with us.
Yes,
Yeah.
we appreciate it. And over breakfast, I'll tell you about how my grandfather started his farm with a team of horses, a single plow. So anyhow, thank you all for watching. We will be back again in 2 weeks for episode 14. The great thing about producing this yourself is you only get canceled if you cancel yourself.
That's
Everybody have a great week.